begin from the beginning. The form is perceived and the physical eye is its perceiver. It, the physical eye, is perceived and the mind is its perceiver. The mind with its modification is perceived and the witness, the self, is verily the perceiver. Yet it, the witness, is not perceived by any other. If one can question, from where am I looking at the thoughts? Who is aware of thoughts? Am I the thought or the witness of the thought itself? So these questions, you don't even have to give an answer. You just question in order to shift the attention either to the question, and when there is no answer, the question completes itself and you remain as the witness, witnessing itself. Even if what I described does not happen, at least it gives a perspective for the mind to have the recognition that I am the witness of the thoughts, rather than me being the thoughts themselves. Okay? From this sloka he moves to the next one. He opens the forms, object of perception, appear as various on account of such distinctions as blue, yellow, gross, subtle, short, long, etc. The eye, on the other hand, sees them itself remaining one and the same. So here he's just breaking between forms and the physical eye. The forms are distinct from each other, different colors, different shapes, different size, yet the eye remain one and the same. That means it doesn't change in relation to what it perceives. So we can see that the one perceives the many, yet the forms cannot perceive the one, the physical eye. Now he moves to the second one, which is interesting because that's a clue already for one to realize that the objects that are perceived are not affecting the mind.
But they are able to.
No. They cannot.
Cannot affect the mind.
The right. Objects, the forms, cannot affect the mind itself.
Yes.
Here he's pointing that even the eye remains one and the same, is unaffected. Yes? Now he goes to the physical eye and the mind itself. Such characteristics of the eye as blindness, sharpness, or dullness, the mind is able to cognize because it is a unity. This also applies to whatever is perceived through the ear, skin, etc. So here he's saying that the characteristics of the eye is change. It can be blind, it can be sharp, the vision can be blurry, dullness. The mind, though, is able to cognize it because it is a unity. It means it can perceive the change that is undergoing through the physical eye or the other four senses. So even here, the senses are not affecting the mind itself.
No, it's the mind that can see the state of the senses.
Yes, exactly. The changes cannot perceive the mind. So here he was taught, before he was pointing that the form is not affecting the senses that perceive it. And the form, the first form one has is the physical body. So the body does not affect the five senses. The five senses do not affect the mind. Yeah, the mind is like in a closed aquarium, basically, or in a closed. So it appears like it sees through it, yet it never has a contact outside of itself. It's like being in a room full of glass, it's all glass, that it perceives through it, imagining that it is what it is perceived, and that it is in contact with it, when the truth is, it is not. Consciousness, so now he gets to the mind and its modifications is perceived by the witness, and the witness is its perceiver. And here he starts for the witness is consciousness. Consciousness illumines such other mental states. So it's already pointing that it is illuminating the different states of mind. And he starts desire, determination, and doubt, belief and non-belief, constancy and its opposite, modesty and others, because it, consciousness, is a unity. So he was leading, the I remains one and the same, the mind is a unity, and really what is unity is consciousness itself.
Always leading back to consciousness.
Yes, it's always leading the mind to return back to who you truly are.
When they say unity, can you give me another word that doesn't seem to sit so well?
In the non-dual, he used the word single. Even not one. Single means alone. It alone exists. One can begin one, then there is two. Even the words, how they use it, one, they choose the particular word.
So the four parts of the mind are a unity,
Yeah, because they work in
conjunction.
with each other. In a moment we'll get to the Buddhi, because he breaks the first sloka. The form is perceived by the physical eye, and the physical eye is its perceiver. The physical eye is perceived by the mind, and the mind is its perceiver. The mind and its modification is perceived by the witness, and the witness is verily the perceiver. And the witness is not perceived by any other. That means there is nothing beyond it. It is the source.
The dead end street.
Yeah, it's the substratum. It holds everything together. Now he describes the characteristics, as much as he can, of consciousness. This consciousness that does neither rise nor set. That means he's saying it has no beginning, no end. That means that it's outside of time. It does not increase, nor does it suffer decay. So it doesn't expand or contract. That means it's
No longer in space.
yes. So it's beyond time, beyond space. Being self-luminous, that means it is conscious of itself by itself. That's another hint that consciousness is conscious of itself by itself. It does not need another entity to be conscious. From the mind perspective, when there is identification with the mind says, I, from the point of view of the mind, have to recognize or be conscious of awareness, because that's what it does with the impressions that come through the senses. That's how he really cognizes the senses or the objects, because it is conditioned to perceive objects, senses, and thoughts or impressions that come through the senses.
But it cannot perceive consciousness.
That's right.
But it can be illuminated by consciousness.
Yes, actually, consciousness illuminates throughout the whole downward or outward bent. All the spectrum can be of thoughts, sense perception, forms. So, if you would take a flashlight and the light is the source. The further you go further from the light, then basically the light gets weaker. So the light that is permeating and actually enabled to perceive the forms is where there is the least illumination.
Let's say that one again.
Yeah.
There is
A flashlight, and the further it goes, the weaker it gets. Then
who is farthest from the source?
The form.
The form. So if we'll see its downward spiral of light, it is the farthest, so it has the least light.
so it's why. Is that why it appears the most solid?
Not necessarily. Possibly. It just shows that we cannot derive the source of light from objects.
It does maybe appear to be more solid because the light cannot penetrate.
And the
It can
most
illuminate but not penetrate.
Possibly. It just to recognize that that's one thing. And the other is, let's assume there would be happiness, inert happiness in the object. How would we derive it from it? Let's say there is, again, inert.
And inert meaning
Inside. Yeah?
Inside. Inert.
That's what I...
It's non-moving. It's dormant.
No, so I didn't mean that word. I take it back. Let's say the object has within it happiness. How would we derive the happiness from the object? Derive means, let's say in orange, the derivative of the orange is orange juice. Yes? So let's assume there's happiness in an object. Because I want the object because I believe that I would be happy if I get what I want. Let's assume there would be happiness in the object. How would we derive it from the object?
Well, if that was true, then the mind would perceive it, since it is the perceiver.
But the mind is not affected by the object.
It has no contact with an
But
object.
it perceives.
Right.
So it can perceive happiness.
Yet, how would it derive it, the happiness from it?
By the illumination of it, from consciousness.
See, the mind cannot see the essence. The essence is hidden and projects the false. Just as an analogy, what essence is.
So our mind can project, but it's not going to necessarily be the...
So let's say we go back to an orange. If we cannot see the orange juice, we have to derive it out. So I ask, let's assume there would be happiness in the objects, which there isn't, how the mind would be able to derive it out of it?
I go back to saying, perceiving, if I see somebody laughing outside, I can perceive it. I'm not laughing with them. I have nothing to do with it in them, but I still can perceive it. And that's my mind is perceiving it.
So what are you perceiving?
A certain movement and sound that I can associate, I can name.
So isn't it that you perceive it just very quickly a projection, which means another word would be interpretation of the mind within?
Yes, yeah.
So how would you be able to derive it from them?
Under those kind of investigation, I would not.
You would not. We don't have the ability.
Whatever, it cannot affect mind. Period, right?
What is your experience?
My experience is it does not affect the mind. The mind does its own trip all on its own.
It doesn't affect me, but we're talking about the mind. Does it affect the mind?
No, it doesn't affect the mind. He said about 3 days ago, one of the things that we really need to grasp is that objects cannot affect the mind.
That's right. Even if we open this, we look deeper into the slokas, what he's pointing that the many never affect the one.
Yes.
So we can see that the gross does not affect the subtle. What's affecting the mind is the false notion that I, as a separate entity, affecting by thoughts, because that I is a form of reactivity. It's constantly reacting to thoughts. So some thoughts it likes and some thoughts it dislikes. Then because it happens so quickly, it's easier to see that the mind is reacting to bodily sensation. Some sensation it likes and some sensation it dislikes, yet it's reacting to the interpretation of the sensation itself. Because if, let's say, there is a sensation in the mind, in the body, and I would just take the mind away, it wouldn't react to the sensation. So it is
would be there.
Huh?
But the sensation would be there.
Yeah, but there's no reaction.
Okay,
A reaction
let's
as an interpretation mean an effect. We're interpreting some object's happiness. We're interpreting it. Does it
We're
mean?
projecting it.
Huh?
We're projecting, that's what it has.
Does it have an effect necessarily, or can it be neutral?
Can the projection have an effect?
Yeah.
If you become invested in it, yes.
so
If you don't become invested,
But it's not the object itself that's...
let's look at this.
I know it's not.
Let's say I'm gonna go somewhere. I think that I'm gonna go there. I project the place I'm gonna go, and and now I imagine that it's gonna be terrible. So that imagination affects me.
Yes.
Now I imagine I'm gonna go to the same place. Yet instead of imagine that it's gonna be terrible, I imagine it's gonna be amazing and wonderful. So what's it gonna affect the mind? The imagination. So.
But if I go there without any neutral,
and now I get to the place,
okay,
and I imagine that it is amazing, then the world for me is amazing. Let's say I imagine it's terrible, then the world for me would be terrible. Now we'll take 100 people, the same place, each one would have a different experience by their interpretation of the place. That means the place has no effect on anybody, it's only their interpretation of the place itself. Now we'll take it further. We'll have 100 different interpretations, like glasses that we'll put on each one. Each one would have a total different interpretation standing in the same place.
I agree, but you need those two things in order for that to happen. You need the object, you need the food, and then you need the food has to be there. Otherwise, nothing happens. Everything, there can be no imagination.
Why in the dream? In the dream, you imagine a bad scenario going on in the dream. In the event that you imagine, it's totally real. Now, even they say, there is two stories that I wanted to read from Vashista. One is talking about this, how we relive a dream, and it appears totally like the waking state, and we can't even distinguish it. We'll go over it.
Because I'm back with the food.
Yeah.
If I go to the restaurant and there is no food, there is no elevation or depression.
Yeah, there's elevation that there's no food.
No.
Reason.
I'm going there I show up. I show up to somebody's house. If they serve me food, fine. If they don't serve me food, fine. I'm still fine. But when they serve me food, and then the senses, taste, the sense of taste. Taste it. There is an effect.
On whom?
Okay, I go into the gross. Its effect on the senses. It affects the senses.
Okay.
And it's perceived by the mind.
Okay. Let's assume.
It's perceived by the senses. It doesn't affect the senses.
But the senses, but the mind perceives the senses. Whatever happens with the senses, the mind perceives it.
And then what it does.
And then it interprets it.
And then, after it interprets it,
it says, I like it or I don't like it.
So if it likes it, it generates a particular sensation.
Yes.
If it doesn't like it, it generates the opposite sensation.
Yes.
And once it generates the sensation, it starts to react to the sensation. If it likes it, it wants more. If it dislikes it, it wants to get rid of it. So let's say I eat a great food, so I eat more already a long time ago full, I eat more. If the food is like disgusting, I was like, ugh, take this away, right? So actually, if the mind is reacting to the interpretation, the 4 movements we talked that Buddha realized, he made it very simple. Impressions come in, they are registered, there's nobody who labels it. The second movement, once you label it, and the labeling goes like dislike, that's it. Good, bad, right, wrong is all the same.
Okay.
Love, hate, yes? So we'll stay on a like and dislike it's like the premise. So when it likes it, it labels it good, it likes it, it generates a sensation, it reacts to it automatically. Okay?
Yes.
Now what happens is the question that's where Vashista realizes or he challenges. He asks, does the body have sensation or it has no sensation? And he says majority of human beings don't know the answer. So does the body has a sensation? Is there an experience? Is there a sensation in the body or there is no sensation?
I mean, as we know the body itself, if it touches fire, it reacts and moves away from fire. So we call that a response to it.
Okay.
So it sensed it, a danger,
Okay.
a harmful danger. It moved away. It doesn't need the mind to do that.
You were a surgeon, right?
Yes.
When you anesthetize, does the body have sensation? Was he jumping?
No.
So what
But I destroyed the possibility of that body to do that. That's why we did that, but under normal conditions, because that I don't consider normal condition, going under the knife. As a total being, as a total object, it's going to respond.
let's say
Unless I do something special.
let's say somebody falls asleep in such a way that is so deep. Now you throw the body into the fire. Would the body have any sensation? Would it feel anything?
Without waking up.
Yes.
I would say yes.
Okay. Good. So this is something for one to explore and challenge, because that's why Vashista, he is pointing, and you can go and look at what he's pointing in the Yoga Vashista. He is pointing that the body has no sensation whatsoever. The sensation is in the mind. Because the body and the mind appear to be identical, it appears like the body has a sensation. Yet we can see that when the mind is not in contact with the physical body in the dream, there is sensation, there is real experiences in the dream. I can run and hit a log and fall and then be under pressure and then something is going to happen and I'm sweating in the dream and it's like nothing is really happening in the physical realm.
See, I apologize for the response that that you were asking of us, of me, in the sense of it. It so happens that the body has a mechanism called reflex that doesn't need to be awake or asleep or anything else to have a reflex. A person in coma, we test their reflexes.
Okay.
And it depends what that reflex does. It makes for us to make a diagnosis or to investigate more so.
Yeah, but is there a sensation with the reflex?
There's a movement.
That doesn't mean anything, because like I have read somebody,
So
one of the doctors,
Yeah.
he said that he would open the digestive system of somebody who already died,
Yeah.
and he would put strong herbs,
Yeah.
and the digestive system responds to the herb and
Yes.
start to function.
Yes.
Except, was there any sensation, or just a response, a reflex, as you mentioned?
It
Or
was a response, and it's the word sensation that's needed to be translated.
okay.
That's what was
We-
difficult, the sensation.
Yeah.
You know, the senses. You know, we talk about the senses. So sensation comes from the word senses.
Yeah. So this is where in Vashista he invites to really investigate, challenge it.
Yeah.
Means within you, is the body have sensation, or the sensation is actually in the mind, except that it happens so fast that it's overlooked. Yes. And we can go, as we continue with the seer and the scene, we can see that actually we can see how identification creates a veiling which makes it appear identical, right? So what happens, the body and the mind appears to be identical.
Well, doesn't the mind permeate the cellular level?
Yes.
So therefore it is one.
So if there is no thought, is the body have sensation?
No.
We have to
Then-
really come to
Yeah,
this conclusion.
Then I say no, because I just extracted the mind from the cellular level.
So where is the sensation?
There is no sensation at that time if I extract.
So if it's not in the body, where is the sensation?
In mind.
In the mind.
The more I would start to recognize that,